Hello and welcome to the final week. This is looking at Chapter 16, Global Issues and Ethnic Conflict. Classically, we saw in the 1800s, we saw immigration from Europe to America. Now, since about the 1950s, we see people from Latin America and the Caribbean coming to the US, Canada, and Western Europe. People from South and East Asia to the US, Canada, Australia, and Western Europe. And lastly, people from North Africa, the Middle East, and Southern Europe to Northwest Europe and North America, mainly because of uneven economic and social development and political conflicts. Uneven development is workers from less developed countries migrate to countries where jobs are more plentiful and lucrative. So we see an example with this that comes to my mind is China.
And you see mostly teenagers from the countryside, 17, 18-year-olds far away from very poor homes.
So this is home.
They live in a dorm with 7 strangers, spend 6 days a week repeating the same task again and again.
So what I do is just put one screw that fasten the speaker to the back case of the iPhone. We will start in the factories at 7:30 and then we will spend 12 hours inside of the factories. But actually we only do 10.5 hours work because the break time is deducted. There are still some facilities or mechanism that prevents workers committing suicide. They have the nets in the stairs, and also all the windows, they have this ceiling like cage where you can jump from your window.
And I think that is one of the significant factors behind this alarming number of suicides.
The next reason for migration would be political conflict. So, as we might imagine, basically war refugees or ethnic conflicts that break out that basically force people to migrate for, well, their survival. Looking at immigration trends in Europe, after World War II, Western Europe's homogenous society saw a rapid transformation because of immigration from, well, all over the world after the 1960s. In places like Germany, little effort was made to integrate migrant workers into the mainstream society. Their living conditions were usually substandard. In Germany, nearly 3 million Turks have been denied citizenship despite being second and third generation, having lived there that long. A person with German ancestry could have been born in Russia, speaks zero German, and can obtain German citizenship by simply moving back to Germany. Whereas in France, all you have to do is be born on French soil and boom, you're a French citizen. We're actually seeing some of that here.
These Russian women all came to Miami to give birth. As a result, their babies are American citizens. That's right, Russian mothers, American babies.
I'm such type of mom who want to give her child the best what I can do.
And the best is an American passport. While the practice is controversial, it's perfectly legal. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution makes anyone born on American soil an American citizen.
If American citizen, American passport is a big plus for the baby, why not?
In places like the Netherlands, where Muslims make up only 10% of the population, yet because they are so culturally different from the native population, it sparked these anti-immigration views and actions towards them.
Wilders' Freedom Party is the leading opposition party in the Dutch parliament after coming in second place in last year's elections. The far-right MP had previously called for the Quran to be banned. He claims Islam is a totalitarian political ideology rather than a religion. He was previously called for mosques and Islamic schools to be shut down. He had even called for a blanket ban on Muslim immigrants.
In some places, it would be difficult for some countries like Germany, France, etc., to turn away immigrants at this point because they are so dependent upon them to function in society. Due to things like extremely low birth rates, they don't have enough people to supply their labor market, so they've become dependent upon migrant workers. Japan, actually, because they've got such an aging population and basically not enough young people to take care of the old people, they've actually opted for robotics.
Japan is one of the world's fastest aging societies, with a quarter of the population over the age of 65. But with a low birth rate and little immigration, there simply aren't enough people to look after them. Since the 1990s, the country has been looking into robotic solutions to help look after its elderly people.
And if you have already taken this and seen this before, I apologize. This is repetition. I just love talking about Japan and China. Is what binds citizens together in their unified belief and loyalty to their nation as a political entity. Now, ethnic nationalism, as you can imagine, is what it kind of sounds like. People's unified sense of collectiveness, this bond they share simply based upon their ethnicity. This section of the chapter, we're looking at conflict, what I would like to call when nationalism goes wrong. So our first example is looking at the Rwanda genocide. Essentially what it came down to was the Tutsis versus the Hutus. Basically after the Belgian colonization, the Tutsis were left as the ruling elite of the population. Even though they only made up 15% of the population, they became the ruling elite. So you can see where some resentment stemmed from there. Well, in 1999, when a plane carrying the Hutu president was shot down and he was subsequently killed, essentially, all hell broke loose. Hutus were calling for every Tutsi to be killed, men, women, children, everyone. We're talking newborn babies being thrown into ditches and just massacred, murdered. Basically, if you were Tutsi, you were dead. 75% of Rwanda's Tutsi population was exterminated. Nearly 800,000 to 1 million people were killed. These exact numbers are unknown because they were just dumped into unmarked graves. To this day, they're still digging these things up and the death toll continues to climb. This all occurred in less than 3 months.
There are two main ethnic groups in Rwanda: Hutus, who make up about 85% of the population, and the Tutsis, who are a minority but have long dominated the country. Before European colonizers arrived in the late 19th century, the Tutsis were mostly aristocratic cattle herders. The Hutus were mainly peasant farmers. The two groups share the same language, and they both are majority Christian. On the night of 6th of April 1994, a plane carrying President Habyarimana and his Burundian counterpart Cyprien Ntaryamira, both Hutus, was shot down, killing everyone on board. The mystery of who shot down the plane endures to this day. Hutu extremists blamed the RPF and immediately started a well-organized campaign of slaughter. The RPF said the plane had been shot down by Hutus to provide an excuse for the genocide. Within hours, a campaign of violence spread from the capital Kigali throughout the country, which would not stop for 3 months. The genocide was carried out with meticulous organization. Lists of government opponents were handed out to militias who went and killed them, along with all their families. Neighbors killed neighbors, and some husbands even killed their Tutsi wives, saying they would be killed if they refused. At the time, ID cards had people's ethnic groups on them, so militias set up roadblocks where Tutsis were slaughtered, often with machetes. Thousands of Tutsi women were taken away and kept as sex slaves.
we're exposed to death every day and night. It's a desperation read on all the faces here.
And yours too?
Yeah, mine too.
This is Yves, one of the hundreds of thousands of Rwandans now living, or at least trying not to die, on the road from Goma. He's 21. A few weeks ago, he was a student, but as the rebel army advanced, he fled with the rest of his family, walked 3 days across Rwanda to Zaire, running from death to death. His elderly parents are weak and hungry. His brother is already dead, and Yves, who hasn't eaten in several days, is stoic about his own survival.
I know that today, if I don't kick the bucket for the disease, I can kick the bucket for hunger. Because till now, nothing has done to save all these people. We are afraid to return there. If we return, we know that we will be killed, we'll be dislayed, and no one will survive. So we prefer to stay here and be killed by the disease and hunger.
This is the church in Nyamata, 30 kilometers south of Kigali. During the genocide, 15,000 people fled here, seeking sanctuary inside. But Hutu militias stormed the building and murdered nearly all of them. It's now a mass grave and a memorial. The crypt is cold and it smells of mould. Bones serve as a memorial. Their message is that the crime shouldn't be forgotten or denied and should never happen again. Some of the skulls reveal how crude the weapons were that were used against the victims.
"100 days of death and desperation. Rwanda's dark past still present in the minds of so many. On April 7th, 1994, Hutu extremists turned on the Tutsi minority. Neighbours killed neighbours. Hutu priests and nuns killed Tutsis sheltering in their churches. Husbands even killed their Tutsi wives. In a little over 3 months, at least 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered.
A place where you give a bit of space to have a sleep, you know?